Appreciate it. Councilman Paul, could you join us up here, please? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think we have one missing. We do have a quorum. So we're reconvening. Miss Winger, you were up to speak, please. Thank you, and my apologies for the break. This is on item, yes, ma'am.
I would strongly urge you to remove all the additional employees and any special considerations for employees from this agenda item and deal with it at a later time. I think you've heard from enough people. You do not have a business plan for either of the businesses that you're, projecting in here. And, I don't know about the passport office. You may be able to make an argument for that. I don't think, based on the figures that Wayne has provided, that there's an argument to be made for an impound lot. I know that you said at the last meeting that you had people who had told you that they would like an impound lot in the city, but not at that location. And I would like to know, as you always asking me, who those people are. But I will say this. I have talked to 3 people who told you that. And when I asked them, where would they like it to go, their answer is they would like it to go in one of our commercial areas. So I asked them where. When they stopped to think about it, we don't have any commercial areas, with the exception of the lot that belongs to HEB, that doesn't back up to a residential area. So it has the negative impact, regardless of where else we put it. You yourself brought up, the other areas that, would have the same impact within the city. The same is true for all our commercial areas. West Avenue, Northwest Military, even Blanco, if there was something available there, all of them back up to residential areas, and we continue to have the problem. I have to say, I am very fond of Wayne Davis. I'm very sorry to see him go. But I have come to realize in this that one of the reasons I'm so fond of him is that he reminds me of my father, who was a very quirky person. And my father always liked to buy gadgets, or he liked people to give him gadgets. And so he was constantly compiling the latest gadget. And we ended up with all these gadgets. Nobody knew what to do with them, and very rarely did he use them. Wayne has an obsession with going after money-making things that he hears about from other cities. The other cities that he's mentioned are not in any way comparable to
Gentlemen.
Castle Hills. Do you want me to? What?
Go ahead.
Okay. He has told us that he is impounding 30 cars a month. Those are his figures. That's 1 car a day. You don't build an impound lot for that. That's not a viable business, even if we had a place to put it, and we don't. So I think that, when you start approving this, I understand that we're talking about it as a concept. What you need to understand, and I think Mr. Paul addressed this in one of his posts, when you put this in the budget and you vote for the budget, you are actually voting for this, and then it's not a concept. So unless you pull things out, you are voting for all of those things in the budget. That includes all of the additional employees. We don't even know what's happening yet. The other thing that Mr. Paul has brought up is that we have not hired all of the people who were in the budget in previous years. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. He's been on the council. I wasn't, so I didn't know that. But here's the problem. They're still in the budget. Take them out. Don't leave them in year after year, because they're there. And the problem with leaving them in is that anytime somebody wants to start hiring, suddenly you have those employees. So if you don't need the employees, and clearly we don't if we haven't hired them, remove them. Nothing on this agenda suggests that you're going to do that. So I think you still have a lot of work to do on this budget, but at the very least, start removing some of the problem areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Okay, we're on item 4. Let's go ahead and get a motion and a second on the table, and then we can go into what we're going to do. Do I have a motion for item 4?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Trevino, seconded by, if there were anything that you actually wanted to cut from the budget, obviously now would be the time. I think when we talked about what Mr. Brennan said regarding specific employee type thing, Douglas?
I have several motions, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like.
All right, let's go ahead and move through them.
This is in regard to the impound lot. It actually applies to both the impound lot and the passport, but we'll do it one at a time.
Let's do them one at a time, please.
To remove from the Castle Hills fiscal year 2018 budget any funds designated for the use or consideration of an impoundment lot and affiliated cost until there has been a cost-benefit analysis by the city or a professional to give us a business model for said lot. All assumptions that can be associated through a cost-benefit analysis have got to be used.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. This is an amendment to the original motion. Do I have a second for the amendment?
Mayor, can I make a couple comments about the impound and the passport acceptance, just as they pertain to the
Make them
budget?
quick, okay? We're doing them by themselves. I don't want to go into a long,
They are,
drawn-out.
they're revenue neutral in the budget. I put in the expense for them and just enough revenue to cover that expense, so you can pull them out at any time. They were only put in as a conceptual, as council approved them, and my intent is that they would come to council at a later date for consideration, for approval, and then we would execute those initiatives. But if I pulled impound lot out of the budget, I'd have to pull an income and a revenue line that equal it, the budget stays the same.
Okay. Did everybody on council understand that? It's a wash, okay? It's just an item that was in the budget in order, if it made money, great, we move forward as far as the conceptual design. If it didn't and it didn't work out, then we obviously wouldn't move forward on it. Did everyone understand that?
Well, that's not what my motion is saying.
What is your
I
motion
mentioned we
say?
should remove this entirely from the budget, period, until there has been, by the city, a study using a business model for the operation of said lot and using assumptions of a thorough cost-benefit analysis. I don't think things should be just sort of wandering around in a budget. Maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't. Whether it's neutral or not, it should be removed.
Okay, so he has a motion on the table, and we have a second by Mr. Paul. Let's go into discussion. Mr. Trevino?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Brennan, if it is in the budget, is it set in stone or is it conceptual?
Virtual budget.
I mean, it's in the budget to be approved. I guess y'all will have to approve the details of it at some point in the future. But it's in there. I think the result of his motion will be to delete it, and y'all take it up again some other time if you want to.
Okay, now, Mr. Vanderwally, is there any reason why we would leave them in there and not take them out and finalize all the details?
Y'all do it either way you want to. It makes no difference to me.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Scott?
If we take out the line items and then later during 2018 decide that an impound lot or a passport office is something that we wanted to pursue, could we pursue it at that point without that money designated as a specific line item?
Yes, because you can amend the budget for city purposes at any time.
Thank you.
Ms. McLean?
No comments on this one.
Thank you. Mr. Paul, it's obvious where you stand, but go ahead.
Yes. As one of the citizens and I visited, I explained at the time that it was a concept, so I didn't have documentation. I probably know more about this, about car business than anybody in this room. J.D. Castrojano's not here, is he? But this is a great idea if the situation fits, if the place fits. Our police department has researched this. They haven't come up with all the details. We haven't come up with the details on the plans. And quite frankly, the discussion on this was accelerated beyond I think they were ready to do. It's kind of got backdoored. Whether it's in the budget, whether it's out of the budget. We aren't the federal government. The federal government, you stick it in there, it's going to get spent regardless. I understand that. But in a small situation like us, it's earmarked. It's earmarked for that or it's not. So it can go either way, really. If you put it in there, you're not going to forget about it. It's there. You can make budget adjustments going and coming. The key is the money will not be spent. The money will not be designated to anything specific unless they come back with a plan and show and tell us how it will work and you know what the results will be. And I have all the confidence that this can work for the city and help. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, I'm a little confused. So you want to wait? You want to wait until? Okay. I want to say a couple of words on this. There's no doubt about it that I might have been the instigator in all this. The chief came up with this about 2 years ago. If anybody knows me, they'll know that we were supposed to be totally electronic by January 1st. Ms. Winger even had a Surface. She was working on it, and she had it down. She really did. There's two people, and I said, guess what, guys? On January 15th, if you're not electronic, you're not going to get a packet. You're going to have to look at it online and print your own off. Well, guess what happened? We're still printing 2 packets. And I embarrassed my colleagues up here for a reason, because I think we need to move forward. We need to move forward with income-producing ideas, and we need to move forward. So I've actually been pushing the chief for a number of months regarding to figure out the details on this. When it came up about Ferdy and Maggie and where it was going to be, I wasn't crazy about that idea, okay, because of the impact of the neighborhood for other reasons than they had also. But with this said, I want to remind council, and I'm not going to give up on this, we need to continue to look for revenue-producing ideas. And I believe that the residents want to help us with this. I had one resident, he's not here right now. I even give him a proclamation, because he was the first resident to me to come with an income-producing idea. Thank you, Thomas Fentress. And you know what? It was a small idea, but he stuck his neck out, and he said something when it wasn't very popular to do so. We have got to come up with revenue-producing ideas. We have Military Highway with the signs. I'm sure I'm sure I'll be labeled the Antichrist on that too. But we have that coming up. We have this impound lot that the chief, Johnny, I guess now you, can go back to the drawing board, and you can come up with this. Rick even has an idea that I don't want to really expound on right now because we're limited on time. But, so with that said.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
you're absolutely right. That's the problem the city faces. We're getting less than 2% on our monies that we keep in treasuries, and we're spending 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6% otherwise. More is going out that's coming in. And you're right. I like this idea of an impounding lot, although it has a long way to go before it is given birth. I think we have to find out where it's going to be outside the city first and foremost. But it also has got to have a business model to it. We'll wish and hope it'll last, it'll work well. I think it'll work, but I want to see a substantial business model that shows that it works. And it's the same with anything that comes up in the passport thing, any of these things. I hope they work, but there has been no business plan or business model provided for any of these ideas. We've just been told, well, it worked in this city, well, it works over there. I want more substance, the council wants more substance, because if this turns out to be as good as we think it is, it'll be a real good moneymaker for the city. But we don't know, and that's why I want the budget cleaned up to where this is not in the budget as a line item. It's removed, so it will be brought back later as soon as we have a business model presented to the council.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I made myself clear as the mayor that, you know, we are real good at saying, oh, we're going to wait on this, or we're going to wait on that, and, you know, we bury somebody and then it never even happened. So I hope that if council does decide to put it out of the budget, that we're serious in the fact that if this isn't the answer, which I think it is, one of the answers, that we continue to look for income-producing ideas. And we step up to the plate like other small cities our size. We've proved it. We've gone out. We've looked at it. And anyway, okay, with that said, we have a roll call vote on this. Was there anybody else that wanted to take a moment to say something other than Douglas? Okay, the item is 4. Nope, the item is 4. Consider and act upon an ordinance of the 2017, and we are pulling out the, totally out the impound lot. We have a motion, we have a second on the table. Mr. Trevino?
I vote to accept.
What?
I vote to accept. Yes.
Yes, okay. Ms. Scott?
I vote no.
Okay. Ms. McGlynn?
No.
Okay. Mr. Paul?
I guess I'm confused. Are we voting on just pulling this one out, or are we?
Yes.
We're pulling the impound lot out of the budget totally.
Yes.
Okay. I vote yea.
Yes.
Okay, impound lot is out. Let's go on to the next item, which is the, excuse me, I'm sorry. Douglas, did you have anything to say?
I just have a new motion to make.
Okay,
To remove from the Castle Hills fiscal year 2018 budget any attempt to create a position of assistant, strike that. The same motion that I had for the impound lot, I will make for the passport thing. To remove from the Castle Hills fiscal year 2018 budget any funds designated for the use or consideration of a passport passport office
okay,
and affiliated cost until there has been constructed by the city or other professional services a business model for the question of said passport office and all assumptions that can be associated with a thorough cost-benefit analysis.
do I have a second on that item on the passport, pulling the item from the budget? Mr. Vanderwalde, I'd like to ask a question. Is this also a wash situation?
Same deal, Mayor. So,
Okay,
but I
thank
don't
you.
know if the councilman is recommending that we approve funds for professional service to make a recommendation. I think I heard that in there somewhere too.
What?
No, I didn't.
I didn't hear that. All I heard was a motion to remove the item from the, from the budget.
That's right.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second on that motion to remove the passport office and any affiliated cost out of the budget? And the city manager tells us it was a wash as far as very similar to the impound lot. Any second?
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and we have a second regarding discussion?
Mayor, may I?
Sure.
We cannot be a passport acceptance facility. That's only the Department of State that can do that. It's a passport passport office. We cannot be that. It's a passport acceptance facility. At our council meeting on August 22nd, 2017, we passed a motion authorizing the application to the United States Department of State's Passport Acceptance Program in an effort to create incomes and revenues. We have already authorized the creation or the submittal of the application. We need to fund this so that if we are accepted, we can actually make good on what we promised to do.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan, you have any comments on that?
Well, the issue now is whether you're going to fund it or not.
Okay,
I have a question.
sure.
In a passport acceptance facility, does the federal government require that anybody who works in this passport acceptance facility be a full-time employee of the governmental body of which it's under?
No, there is no qualification regarding the number of hours of their employment. They just have to comply with their requirements of being 18 and not a criminal, whatever on their application, but not that it be a full-time employee.
Thank you. Is the number we're apparently discussing $44,000 for this one person?
No, I think the way Mr. Vanderwally drafted the budget was estimating a $35,000 salary, but we've clarified that during budget workshops, that what we're looking at is an hourly employee. We're required to have office hours of at least 20 hours, which to my recollection is not a full-time employee. It would be part-time at the $15 range.
So, Mr. Brennan, Ms. McGlynn is correct that my motion is irrelevant because we've already passed at a subsequent meeting that we'll have this. So my motion would have to strictly stick with the funding of it.
Sure, that's what's on the table tonight, is funding of all these, you know,
I strike my previous motion, and I would offer a new one with consideration of the mayor.
Sure.
That funds provided for the passport acceptance office be at this time zero until this office has been fully vetted as to what is going to be done, how much it's going to be cost, what we expect it to do, whether there is a positive cost-benefit analysis for this facility. This is another one of those things, by the way, that I would be in favor of if I could see such a thing.
Well, the problem is
I
at
don't
the
see it.
time, there was a 5-0 vote that we did, and now we put in an application to the federal government and look like typical of what we do all the time. And I'm sorry, I didn't want to go there today, but, you know, we step forward and then we get slapped in the face.
Well, I believe at the last meeting, Ms. McGlynn,
Went 5-1.
Ms. McGlynn said that it was a federal position. And that's what I heard in the last meeting.
It's not a federal position. This is an employee for our office. We are only an agent for the federal government to accept applications for passports. That's all we do. We accept paperwork, we look through it, we make sure it checks the boxes that they teach our employees to do, and then we mail it off.
And why couldn't this, if we've got to hire another part-time person to the tune of $35,000, why can't this be done with the existing personnel that we have?
Mayor, can I address that?
Sure.
I plugged in a salary for a full-time employee simply because the discussion with council was that if this proved to be a good revenue generator for the city, that it would be moved to full-time. So in that eventuality, I made it a full-time employee. Second to that, there is no money against it. Again, it's a wash in the budget. I included an expense and a revenue line that were equal so that they would wash each other out in the budget until we determined how council wanted to move forward, whether we were accepted as a passport acceptance office. And then finally, to Councilman Gregory's question, we have about $117,000 in unfunded liability right now in comp time for the city. And we just, I hate to say it, but we have, our staff is burning comp time because we don't have enough people to meet all the job requirements we have right now. Now, comp time might be the best and smartest way to do it if it doesn't justify another position. Maybe, but there is nobody that could do this 4 hours out of the day and continue to keep up with their regular workload.
So go ahead and move forward with your motion if you'd like to, Douglas.
Yes, I would like a vote on it. Oh, if I can get a second.
You haven't got a second yet?
I'll second it for comment.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Douglas, you want to speak on that item, please?
I stand by what I've already said.
Okay. Mr. Paul, do you have any comments on this?
Well, Mr. Mayor, you are correct. In one of the budget meetings, both situations were voted on 5-0 to move ahead to get what we could do. Quite frankly, at the time, I don't believe I saw that it needed to be a budget item, but it is a budget item now. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at it. Since then, I've tried to do a little research on my own. It seems like there's an awful lot of people, or excuse me, a lot of places you can go get these applications, and post offices for one. And I want to do things, I want to try to do what we can, but until we see the plan and see the actual, why are we special? Why are we different that somebody can't do something someplace else?
You ever tried to get excuse me, never mind.
That's it.
Ms. McLean, did you have any comments on that regarding Saturday and Sunday?
Yes, okay, so out of my research that I have done, the 10 closest places, 7 of them are U.S. post offices that are by appointment only, with the only exception of Parent Vital. The other 3 are downtown San Antonio. Some of them have appointment hours, some of them have open hours. They are full to the gills. We are between 281, I-10, off of 410. Northwest Military takes you out to 1604 in 15 minutes. We're in a prime location in the middle of the 7th largest city of the country. They expect there to be 11 million passports that need to be issued in the next 2 years. Not everyone can mail in. There are a lot of circumstances that have to be done in person. There is a need for another facility, and I see that our city could fit it and capitalize from this opportunity. The lady I spoke with at the passport office in Houston encouraged us to consider evening or weekend hours because no one offers those. It is true, there are places that are closer, but those are private companies that do not operate as this sort of facility. They offer specialized services where they can get your passport in a day or 2 because they drive them to Houston, and that's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing the typical passport application facility or passport acceptance facility, application facility that is offered by the post offices in downtown.
Ms. Scott, did you have any comments on the item, please?
Yes, I did some research today. I found the closest post office to us that takes passport applications by appointment only is the Thousand Oaks location on Henderson Pass. I called them and inquired, I have a family of 4, I'd like to come get passports, when can you book me to come in? The next time they could book me as a family of 4 that would not take a 3-hour time period was the 9th of December. So they encouraged me to call the Alamo Heights post office, who also takes appointments, and they said they could not even talk to me about booking until November 30th. I did not call the Encino Park post office at that point because the Alamo Heights gentleman said, well, you might as well just go over to Parent Vital because they offer a walk-in service. Now, they open at 7 a.m., but you need to get there well in advance, be in line before 7 a.m., and be prepared to wait pretty much possibly all day to get through the Parent Vital as a walk-in location. His suggestion was if I needed it quickly, I could drive to Austin, or I could use one of the private facilities here and pay more. But my point being is that I looked at the facilities closest to us, and if I wanted to go today and get a family of 4, I would, the first appointment I could get would be the 30th, after the 30th of November. Thank you.
Mr. Trevino, do you have any comments regarding this item, please?
Yes, sir, Mayor. I think if we can offer a service to our area and make money on it, that seems like a pretty good idea. That enables us to do more for our residents. Realistically, this one seems pretty easy in that there's not a lot of startup costs. I would question Mr. Brennan again that is there any difference between funding this now, we're not funding it now, and then funding it when we need to? I mean, I just don't understand.
Well, what I should have said on that funding issue, you've authorized a program already. This budget is what's going to fund that program. The city manager, say the government accepts our application, says, right on, y'all submitted a great application, when do you want to start? The city manager's got to be able to write a check for the employer, pay the employee's compensation, salaries, and pay for any other expenditures necessary for the project. If it's not authorized in the budget, either tonight or sometime in the future. He can't do that. He can't write a check against an item that's not authorized in the budget. So it's either got to be approved now, or I guess you could wait until we get accepted by the government, and then amend the budget then. But seems more probable to deal with it right now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more question.
Sure.
How many passport applications have we got to process in order to break even?
About 10 a week.
That would be
10 to
520 a year.
Well, 10 to 20 a week. Let me redo the math. I think when I was meeting with one of the residents earlier today, the number we came up with, if you're going with the $35,000, which is not even what we're offering, and you did 52 weeks, well, divide it by 25 first, because that's the dollar figure we can charge, not assuming pictures. That's $1,400 a year divided by 52 weeks. That's about 26 or 27 a week that you have to process. And if you have to be open 20 hours a week, that's, 1 to 1.6 per hour.
27 passports a week to break even. Correct?
That's assuming a $35,000 a year salary, which is
Right.
not what's being proposed.
Okay. I want to make sure everybody's clear on this one. I'm for this one. This is a no. Sure, Margot, what you got? Go on up to the podium if you don't mind.
If the city of Castle Hills is accepted and y'all decide to fund it, would this employee be considered a federal employee? This is not federal paperwork they're handling, or
No, ma'am, they're considered a city employee.
they would be considered a
They're-
city of Castle Hills
They're
employee?
an employee of us. If you go down to San Antonio to have your passport renewed, they're all wearing City of San Antonio shirts
They are?
in the office. Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
it would be a city
One
employee.
thing I do want to add is, I did go myself and my husband to Perrin Vital for our passports. We walked in, waited 10 minutes, and we were out the door in total 15, 20 minutes. That's it. There was no wait. No appointment, no wait. But I just wanted to know if that employee would have to fall under the Davis-Bacon Act, the salary. And you're saying $15 an hour is what you're budgeting in your mind, but you're not considering the labor burden on that $15 an hour. So you need to consider the labor burden as an additional cost to the city of Castle Hills. Thank you.
I want to make sure everybody's clear
Can
on
you
this.
explain what the labor burden is to the people? That's the
Go ahead.
SUDA, FICA,
Yes,
all,
yes, ma'am.
It's already included, Mayor. It's,
Okay.
it gets calculated in when it gets into the salary line in the spreadsheet. Yeah, it adds all the percentages for FICA, Medicare, TMRS, employee insurance, all that, so.
The thing that drew me to this was the fact that one time when we were going to Spain, we discovered that my passport was expired. As silly as it might seem, this happened on a Friday at 5 o'clock. We were leaving Tuesday. So the thing that really inspired me about this is, to me, this is a no-brainer. We could, this $35,000, that you pulled out of the sky, I think we should, I think we could, as we work into this. Again, this is one of those things that is a wash and that we don't have to do. But I'm going to remind us again that what ended up in my situation is it cost me about $1,000. $1,000 to fly to Houston, go into the federal office, basically, the flight, yes, ma'am. I guess I could have drove, but go over there, stay the weekend, get my passport, and yes, that was a dumbbell me, okay? But the thing that pulled me into this, and I was thinking, is Saturday and Sunday hours, which we're going to do in other departments now, like code enforcement and things like that. So, to me, I feel like it's a good idea, and it doesn't hurt anything, because it's a wash. Now, it sounds like we're going to step back. We could step back if this passes, and, well, Castle Hills did it again. You know, we got all hot and bothered about something. We actually filled out a federal application this time. And with a vote that was considered to go ahead, and we pulled out. I could sit here and probably spend till 1 o'clock in the morning explaining things that council went ahead and moved forward with and had good people in this city work on that we pulled out of. And I won't name the person because he is a well-respected man in this area. He said he won't ever step foot in this place again because, you know, we run people around. Yes,
Mr.
sir?
Mayor, may I real quick before Mr. McCormick speaks?
You forgive me to button in again, but this is an opportunity which, if it works, has a very low upfront financial commitment. The financial barriers to entry are not very large at all. The financial long-term commitment is not very large at all because you can start it up with a part-time employee that you may have to keep for a long time if it works out, and whom you can discharge or put to other services if it doesn't. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is that there is a closer post office, and that's on John Saunders, the airport post office. It's also a passport acceptance office. It has never had a requirement for appointments that I've been able to find, and I've been in there on a regular basis, morning and afternoon, and have never seen a line. It's one of the fastest service post offices in town, and it is close by. However, if Ms. McGlynn is right, and we have 11 million passports issued a year in San Antonio, there may be a piece of that we could make use of. I have my doubts, but it doesn't matter because we can get into it right quick. I think we ought to just get on with it, approve the funding. If we use it, fine. If we don't, it doesn't cost us anything. And if we make a lot of money, great.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick.
Mr.
One
Mayor,
question
I'll
I
take
have.
my
I'd like to make a quick, I called the post office at the airport on John Sanders, and they do not process passports.
Well, they've got a big sign on the door says they do.
Hang on.
Someone I talked to on the phone said they do not.
Hang
Mr.
on.
Mayor, I pull my motion.
Thank you very much.
We ought to
Okay,
get
so
on with it.
thank you, Mr. McCormick. Appreciate your input. Yours also, Margot. Okay, with that said, we have a pulled motion on the table. So we're considering an ordinance adopting on the passport acceptance. The councilman has pulled his motion, so it stays in the budget. Let's go to item 5, please. Consider and act upon an ordinance number 2017-0912E. Adoption of the proposed 2000,
We're still on number 4, Mayor. We never voted on the budget itself.
we don't have to now because he pulled his motion.
Well, his motion was just to withdraw the passport facility. He's got 8 other motions to
Yes,
adjust.
I've got
them.
another motion, Mr.
You're absolutely right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Okay, so the passport stays in. Let's go back to item 4, please. Mr. Gregory?
I move and make a motion to remove from the Castle Hills fiscal year 2018 budget any attempt to create a position of Assistant Public Works Director and any funding that might be associated with the creation of or use of said job. I ask for a second for consideration.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to remove the, did you get that, Minnie? Thank you. To remove any funding regarding the, what'd you call it, Douglas?
It's designated as Assistant Public Works Director funding for $64,000 a year.
It's the $64,000 Public Works Assistant. Any second on that item?
Mayor, that's also the project manager position. It's kind of a dual-headed position, just so you
Got
know.
it, got it. Do I have a second on that item,
I'll
please?
second it.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Second, let's go into discussion. Mr. Gregory?
When we were looking for a city manager last year, one of the aspects that the council at that time liked was that Mr. Vandervelde is an engineer. And we fully expected him to be an engineer, a project manager for the various projects coming up. We discussed that, not a project manager was used for the words, but we expected him to have oversight for the city over the projects. In the past, the city has has not had the need until recently, the last few years, for such extensive oversight. But because, one of the reasons, as I say, we hired Mr. Vanderwall is because he was an engineer, and he would be the oversight person. I don't see any reason why at this time, as long as we have a city manager who is an engineer, that he should not be the oversight person for our city. And thus, we don't need an additional employee for I think it's $64,000 a year.
Thank you, Douglas. I'll come back to you. Mr. Paul?
Oh, thank you. I was beginning to wonder. Mr. Vanderwall knows my position on this. What a project manager does is you have a contractor on a job and you have an engineer on a job. So when an engineer does his engineering in his cost estimates, he packs on 10% or whatever it is to allow him to be the project manager also. Problem we've run into, and the problem you always have a possibility of running into, is something goes wrong, whose fault is it? The engineer not going to step up, the contractor's not going to step up. So it is customary that you have a project engineer. We don't have any projects going on right now. When Mr. Gregory's committee gets going on our streets again, I'm sure we'll have some. I strongly recommend that, this is not a motion, but my thinking is that we can get an engineer to do periodic inspections of our projects as we go along in a project. We don't need to hire somebody. We can pay somebody on a contract basis. But it is important, I believe, to have a project oversight of some sort.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Ms. McLean, did you have any comments or questions regarding the item on the table, please?
Since the beginning of this, I've had a fundamental problem with the way Mr. Vanderwall has titled it as an Assistant Public Works Director and a Project Manager. This idea really came to pass as we realized in considering the next street project of Antler, Atwater, and Honeysuckle, the dollar value of the project manager fees, and thinking back at how many homeowners I've heard since my first council meeting that have come up to this podium and talked to us about the shoddy work and the things that they see wrong with the roads that we have done. And so what I see is that we've had contractors over the years that don't have our citizens back. Having this as an employee that really is a wash to what we're already paying to outside engineering firms, having it as an employee of the city, they have our citizens' backs. They have our back. They can go out and make sure the contracts are being done in a timely manner, that the work's being done, well, and it protects our citizens and it protects our pocketbook. Maybe we will stop issuing final checks before we're actually happy with the work, because we have someone who really is a representative of our owners that we're finally getting our value for.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Ms. Scott, did you have any questions regarding this item, please?
The reason I looked at this as well was, first of all, I thought we hired Mr. Vanderwall in a year in which he was expected to do all of the responsibilities of a city manager. Yet at the same time, if you remember last year, we had, was it 28 streets, Mayor?
28 either
28 street projects.
put over or 12 that were reclamite, so there
Okay.
was 24
In
total.
addition to his everyday and regular full-time scheduled job of being the city manager. So I wanted to look at how much are we paying to hire engineering firms to project manage these projects. Because once again, over and over again, citizens are coming up, we are getting shoddy work. This isn't finished. People are parking heavy equipment on my lawn. They've ruined my driveway. They have backed over my mailbox. The list goes on and on and on that citizens come up, and complain about the work that's being done. And so when I look at the workload that is on Mr. Vanderwalle's desk, it is enormous. It is not a typical workload. It is a workload plus all the additional streets and drainage that everyone is clamoring to be done and is getting done. So it is more than what our city managers in the past has handled. So what I did is I went and I pulled out for the previous year, how much did we pay out of pocket to project managers from a separate engineering firm than the one that was handling the design work and the construction work. And the previous year, it was approximately $80,000. So then I wanted to know, well, how much are we paying for independent contractors to project manage this year? And the number I received was, so far this year, we have paid $91,000 for independent project managers on these projects. They are an engineering firm that has no vested interest in our city. They're taking the money. They're obviously not project managing, and if they are, what they're giving to Mr. Vanderwalle is, I would say, subpar work if we're having all the problems that we're having. So give the project manager a vested interest in this city by making them an employee of the city and save money at the same time. So this position is actually was proposed to save money on project management fees that we're contracting out and to assist Mr. Vanderwalle with all the additional work that's being added to the workload of a typical city manager that they've handled over the past few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Trevino, do you have any questions or comments on the item on the table, please?
Yes, sir, Mayor. I'm of the belief that everything we do should benefit the residents by 2 degrees of separation. I understand that some people have concerns about this position, but the way that I see it is also the way that Ms. Scott sees it, that if we can have somebody that's going to ensure a higher quality of work, there's a better chance that work's not going to have to get redone, and it's going to last a longer time, and it's not going to provide problems for us, the residents. Now, I do agree with Mr. Gregory in that we hired Mr. Vanderwalle because he was a professional engineer. But as a contractor, I don't expect him to be out there for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours a day overseeing these projects because he has other things to do as our city manager. And realistically, as a contractor, we need to have somebody out there that's overseeing for that amount of time, because I know personally I've been called for grass, for broken sidewalks, curbs, everything, and I have no problem taking care of it. But if we had somebody overseeing these things on a regular basis, that would be less of a problem for us, the residents. And realistically, if we can get this position, save some money, and we're also getting an assistant public works director, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we provide a better service to our residents and get things done the right way? I've recently taken up jogging, and I've been running around our streets, and I've seen Cremeria. Cremeria is cracking already. Cremeria is not even 2 years old. If somebody was out there watching it, and then they can report to Mr. Vanderwalle, and he can go out there within 30 minutes, assess it, and take it from there. There's no reason for him to be out there for 3 to 4 hours watching this project.
Leslie, you're signed up for this item.
Yeah, just because you have a city employee doesn't mean they're invested in the city. Fortunately for us, most of our employees are, but not all, because everybody's human and some people are not. Tim, Frank, and Douglas will recall that when Douglas and I first came on council, we were encouraged by your neighbor, Doug Stedman, to go to Chavano Park. And we all went, and the other people who were on council at the time went as well, to see what their street project was like. Before you vote for this, those of you who haven't been to Chavano Park need to see what their streets look like. They do all the work themselves. They don't just crack seal, which, by the way, we don't even do properly here. We just make a mess of it. They do the paving, they do all of the street repairs, and they know how to do mill and overlay by themselves. They don't have to hire anybody else. They do that with one public works director who makes $8,000 less than we're currently paying, and they do it with 4 employees. Now, it's true, they don't have a garbage service, and we love our garbage service. Never have anything but great things to say about that. But they do have a water department, which requires extra certification. So 4 guys, an assistant woman who helps with the books, which we already have, and the public works director are able to do all that work for a whole lot less money than we've been paying. You're right, we have not been getting good work from our contractors. That's what the people have been complaining about. But as I told you before, all of our previous city managers, the job hasn't changed. They have been able to handle the work and go out and review the work and see that it was done properly before checks were written. And we have a public works director who should be able to do that. If that isn't being done, that's the failure. Just because people can't do the work doesn't mean you go hire an additional person. That doesn't solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winger.
Mr. Mayor, may I? Sure. Why not, huh?
Why not?
Chavano Park 10, 12 years ago had bonds, and they repaired their streets at that time. So now, moving forward, all they have to do is pull a trailer behind a pickup and seal coat them. They slurry seal them, because I went out there and visited with them also. And so the streets look great, but the streets were brought up to speed. We're dealing with issues that are far, far gone from that, because nobody, except, quite frankly, in the last 2 years, has paid any attention to our streets. So they're doing a good job of maintaining, because they spent all the money on the bond to get it up. Right now, we have no projects going on, so that's why I say I would rather have a respectable, reliable person to be the project manager on a contract basis that knows what he's doing, and I'm sure there are some available.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Mayor, I hate to even jump into this conversation. First of all, yes, you're right, Councilman Paul. I've spoken with the city manager at Chavano Park. They have a fog seal machine, nothing more, no mill and overlay going on there. Second of all, they're probably, I'm guessing, 20 years younger than the city of Castle Hills, and they've already completely redone all their streets. We're dealing with crumbling infrastructure here that desperately needs repair. And for the cracks on Cremeria, that's because basically the engineer spec'd the wrong treatment. It should have never been a mill and overlay. It should have been a full depth replacement. So it's hard to hold a contractor responsible when they build something according to what the engineer has designed. So I agree with all the or a number of the comments that have been made. I will say this to Councilman Gregory: it would have been nice if you told me I was going to be your city engineer as well as your city manager when you hired me, or when I asked for feedback back in May from the previous council several times and never received it, that, hey, by the way, we want you to be our project manager too. But unfortunately, I didn't hear that. So I just want to clear the record on that. This was an initiative to save money for the city of Castle Hills, to be able to hire somebody that was a project manager, maybe not a full-blown engineer, because you wouldn't be able to hire a licensed engineer worth his salt for $65,000. But you could hire a technician, somebody that really knows construction, that when we do have active construction projects, are there around the clock when construction's going on, versus having to decide when you call somebody out for an hour or two and you're paying them, anywhere from $90 to $185 an hour, depending on where they are in their corporation. So this was an attempt to do that and have somebody full-time during construction, and then also finding the right candidate that would also be able to understudy Rick as an assistant director of public works. So you're really scratching 2 itches there. I agree with Councilman McGlynn. It's kind of an odd fit, but it could work if you found the right candidate to do it. It could save the city money, and you get better construction when it was all said and done, which is, I think, what I've heard the residents say time and time again, that they want better construction. But council, you guys do what you want to on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Van der Walde.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes?
Now we're told, when you go to the doctor, you want to see the doctor, but instead you get a physician's attendant. I've run into that a few times. Now we're told we're not going to get an engineer, we're going to get a technician. This is making the case for Mr. Hall, Mr. Hall,
Douglas,
to hire an engineer who knows what he's doing, when there's a job that needs to have that to be done.
Councilman
that was
Gregory.
a suggestion. is
Councilman
what-
Gregory, I could tell you, I've managed $1 million, multi-million-dollar construction projects. The most important guy on that project from the owner's side is that technician who knows construction and is trained up and knows how things are to be done and not to be done. Not necessarily the engineer who comes in and checks every so often to make sure. You just can't afford to send an engineer out every time. That's called construction administration versus construction inspection. Construction inspection is when you send those technicians out there that are out there to do materials testing, they're out there to make sure that the rebar's in place, that it's clean, that it's up off the ground, that the forms are set according to the engineer's design. Those are the guys that make you a lot of money, and they're not engineers.
Thank you. Before I make a comment, Mr. Worth, did you have something to add to this conversation, please, sir?
Terry Worth, 124 West Castle Lane. I'm sitting here listening, and this, to me, the gap that's not filled is oversight. Oversight not only on the construction, the actual construction preparation, review of the plans to make sure it's right, but also on oversight of the initial project. The comment was made, the reason why, what was the street that's a cracking, right? I'm sorry? Comaria. Add in West Castle Lane because it's cracking too. The issue is the oversight in the beginning with the design. Where was that? In both of those circumstances, the subbase is what this is all about, asphalt. The base material, and if it's not of the capacity, the strength initially, you need to go back and just fix the base before you put the material on it. And I would say your comment regarding a technician that knows what he or she is doing, that's got to be the tie that binds. And you're right, and this is one of the issues that I had a problem with this. You at least run the case of potentially having a inspector, a consultant that comes out and does the inspection while the project is underway. But apparently that hasn't worked out real well with these projects. But it's got to go back to the oversight. And respectfully, if you do get that technician that on the project, but you got to really vet the right to find the right person to be that guy that can do that. My biggest concern is there's going to be projects that come up, last comment, there's going to be projects which come up that the person you're talking about here is going to be a great a paving guy or person. What about the special project that it's an AC project or it's a finish out project? Who's going to do that? Is the same guy that's vested in and very knowledgeable about paving? Is he going to be a consultant to inspect mechanical work? What about that? You're going to have a special issue of if you have a special project to still get a consultant in, but it goes back to oversight.
Thank you. I want to point something out, and this is something that actually, you know, folks, we have been working on this, or the city manager and I, for the past few months, and there has been times when we threatened not to give them their check, and we have threatened them, and we didn't give them their check. And they were up here crying, and they waited till Monday and Tuesday, and we went back and we did some things. Now, on the city managers, as far as jumping in and helping him out a little bit, he wasn't here when this Cremaria situation happened. Okay, that went back to a previous situation. So and I'm not blaming them, I'm not by any means, but there was a situation where we didn't really have a lot of confidence in the whole system, and we had to hold checks, and we held them. And we still, don't we still owe them some money on the current deal?
Yes, we haven't paid retainage out. We haven't finished that project up yet.
Okay, so that's kind of where it stands now. In fact, there's a rule around here that nothing goes out with the engineers without my signature on it. So if you want to blame somebody, blame me right now from now on, because we have a two-signing system, and I will not sign an engineer's check until every single item has been checked off. Now, that brings up the subject about this employee that we want to hire. Moretta Scott, Alderman Scott, and I sat down last Thursday and Friday and went through every single invoice from 15, 16, 17, and 18. Every single invoice by line items. $91,000 was that was lunch money. Because when these guys do an invoice, sometimes it breaks it out as program manager fees, and sometimes it bills it into construction work. And when you look at it, it like stares you in the face, and you know, wow, how could you have $10,000 worth of construction work when over here, the same job that they were doing over here was only $8,000? So, they're masters. We're not going to get into what I feel about engineers, but they're masters at billing. Okay, I'm in the sales business. They're in the engineering business. I get it. Okay, and so what they do is, whether or not it's right to bring on another person is going to be council's decision up here. But I can verify that just this year alone, we expended $91,000 in project management fees. Is that his fault? I'm not going to point my finger at Kurt Vanderwalde, but what I am going to say is I too, when we hired him, thought that he could also take over some engineering duties. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I told everybody that was involved in the hiring process. Come to find out, there's a license involved, and there's a stamp involved, and there's all this kind of stuff that that we were not aware of. So with that said, I want to throw that out and say that we're not coming up with figures or throwing things out like we need another employee or we need this or we need that. Margot even brought up something I thought about a second ago. Is this salary including FICA and everything in the back end? That's what needs to also be taken into consideration when we hire somebody or we contract somebody. Mr. Paul has been working on someone who is greatly respected in this city, and I'm not going to call a name because I don't have his permission, but he would be willing to come in on a consulting basis, on a project basis. So it's not like that we're not working on it. Now, why didn't we tell everybody about it? Because we've got a lot of fish in the pond, a lot of fish in the pan frying right now, and there's some things that need to deal with on 2018 budget.
Mr. Mayor, I have a
Yes.
question. The streets project is obviously going to be ongoing for many years. Mr. Gregory, can you give me an idea, since you sit on that committee? I mean, we're getting ready to embark upon our project for 2018, which is estimated to be over $1 million, which I assume will have over $100,000 worth of project management fees to it, since it's at about 10%. How many more years do you think we're going to have to go through the street project if we do the make it, plan it, spend it type of budget, which is fiscally what we're on, where we get the money, we plan the project, and we spend it? How many more years of street projects do you estimate that we have until we get finished with all of the streets that we need to fix?
Lord. Well, the answer to that question is, I asked Mr. Vanderwalde in June to prepare something to be presented to the council in September for a 3-year plan. We have it, basically the genesis of it, but he has had to put it off for the last month or two because he has said the budget overrode all his time and he couldn't do it. We will present this plan in October. because the budget will be behind us, and it'll be a 3-year plan. It's going to be, for major projects, I'm just guessing, it would be nothing more than a guess. I would say, if you just look at streets and not drainage, streets probably 8 to 12 more years. Maybe less, maybe more. It all depends upon what you do on the street.
So for at least in the foreseeable future of 5 to 6 to 7 years, this position would probably save us the amount of the salary every year if we're bringing it in-house. That's what I'm just trying to get at, is that doing this, it's not a position that we're going to need for 1 year. We've got ongoing streets that really potentially should be infinite. We should be always on a street program, maintaining the ones once they're
We're battling
fixed.
over whether or not to spend 100, depending upon the figure that's being passed around, anywhere between 150 to 200,000, somewhere in that range, on one street that came up all of a sudden. But one thing that this discussion has brought forth, thank you, Terry, for that, is this is a complex question. It really is a complex question. You really do apparently have to have, from the get-go, the right people looking at the right things. So rather than have this position for right now, I really think we ought to seriously sit down with people like Terry and other people who are knowledgeable and write up exactly what this position does, rather than just hiring somebody and sending him out there and you have no idea what he's going to do.
That's great, but then we still need to fund it. So let's fund it and then figure out what the person is going to do at another meeting when we have a workshop.
Well, the funding can be put in place when you have the description, precisely what has to be done. Now, that can easily be done later down the road, be it 3 months or 2 months or 6 months. That's not the question. But temporarily, if we have any projects going in the meanwhile, we ought to hire somebody on a temporary basis, a specialist, as Mr. Paul is talking about. But you're right, this is a very difficult question. Here, the West Avenue thing was talked about, and the gentleman who was talking to the contractor, he said, oh, well, the city's responsibility, if water gets under this slightly, it's going to be all your responsibility and none of mine. And that sent shivers up and down my spine when I heard that. But I do think until we have defined exactly what this position should be, let's do that first. And once we get that done, I could probably agree to the funding of this position. But until that time, I think we should hire people out as the job requires. And right now, no job is required, but you will be needing it maybe by the 1st of next year.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second on the table regarding this item. It will be a roll call vote regarding whether or not we're going to pull the program manager, i.e. Backup sanitation assistant, or whatever we called him, however we listed that on the thing. Mr.
Assistant Public
Trevino.
Works Director and Project Manager.
There you go. Mr. Trevino, are you clear with what the item is you're voting on?
Yes, sir, Mayor.
Thank you. How do you vote?
No.
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 Mr. Paul? Mr. Douglas? Okay, the item stays in the agenda, on the budget. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is still item 4. I believe we have one more to deal with. Douglas, did you want to move forward on that particular item as far as employee salary, I believe it was? COLA, yes.
I move that we accept a COLA cost of living at 9:15. A COLA of 2% with regard to cost of living for the employees of Castle Hills. And that we remove from consideration at this time all special salary considerations of employees who are granted more than 2%.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Mr. Gregory, which is a 2% COLA and removing all items of compensation on the agenda that exceeds 2%.
Can we wait for Mr. Paul to return, please?
Yeah, we're going to do that. Unless we have a second before Mr. Paul gets here. Okay, we'll wait for Mr. Paul.
Mayor, in the pause, can I say something?
Sure.
I just want to address something Mr. McCormick mentioned earlier, and that is how do our employees compare to others? I did do some analysis. I do have a couple different salary surveys that I took a look at, and defying the conventional wisdom that Mr. McCormick referred to with that, compounding interest, Albert Einstein and everything else, a lot of our employees are below their peers on average from the other small cities. Some are above, but if you look at the average, we are below. So
Let's get into the discussion, then I'll be sure and call on you, okay? So you
well,
can-
I just was throwing out there as Councilman Paul.
Okay, Mr. Paul, we have a motion on the table regarding the COLA at 2% and also taking out of the budget anything on special revenue for employees above 2%. 2%. Okay, we have a motion on the table. We needed a second and was wondering if you were going to entertain that or whether you were going to.
I'll second it.
Oh, okay, surprise. All right, with that said, we're going to start on the left side of the table this time. Excuse me, the right side. And Douglas, will you move forward with that, please?
Sort of like Animal Farm, all animals are equal except some are more equal than others. I wandered through this budget, and we just got a whole new raft of stuff this evening. And I found one or two or three or four, you just don't know what you're looking for until you find it, of people who gets considerably more than 2%. So I would just simply say that they be removed for consideration for those additional monies and let them stick with their colleagues at 2%.
Mr. Vanderwally, could you clarify which salaries were increased? Because I understand with the change of court that we were making an adjustment in the court clerk salaries.
Yeah, so there were 3 positions that we converted from exempt to, or from non-exempt to exempt. I got it right this time, Councilman. To salaried positions. One is the code compliance officer, the other is the senior court clerk, and the third is the police captain. They all meet the definitions in the FLSA. I know there was some false information that was put out on Nextdoor regarding the weekly salary. The weekly salary required is $450 per week. They have to make at least that much in order to be considered salary exempt. And they have to meet a list of criteria, and they're broken down into several categories. So those 3 meet those criteria, and they got I should say that of the 3 of them, only one of them have we actually discussed salary, and my recommendation would be to increase her salary to the average for the local area as our senior court clerk, especially now that you've just voted that we become a court of record and the responsibility is a little bit more challenging because she's handling civil and criminal issues in her court. So that said, those are the ones I recommended, as we've talked about it multiple times, an increase in salary for the Public Works Director. So that's in there. And then I don't know what else Councilman Gregory might be referring to. Do you have any specifically you want to ask me about, Councilman? Because I don't know
I
if
sat here
any other off the
15
top of my
years
head.
ago, and I saw a city manager pilloried by exposure of salaries and what people make. I was trying not to have to bring this out for individuals. You, of course, want to bring it out for individuals, but I will tell you, not of course, but you were talking about individuals. There are items in the budget that simply say, people who are in the budget that are getting 15 to 20% bump in pay, another person getting 10% bump in pay, others are getting more than 2%. My point is simply this. Everybody should get 2%. Anybody who has over 2%, that should not be considered. They should get 2% like everybody else. That's all.
Again, I have no idea who you're talking about at 20%. You'll have to show that to me. Maybe there's a misunderstanding here. I think I've told you about all the ones that are above what I would recommend for normal COLA, Council. And if there's others that Councilman Gregory wants to sit down and discuss with me, he's welcome to come anytime, and I'd love to sit down with him and discuss them.
Okay, I want to ask
Gregory,
one.
I just asked for clarification about which ones were being adjusted.
Again, that would be, you guys know about the Public Works Director. Our court clerk's current salary is, I believe it's 39.5. The average in the area is over 42, so I would bump her salary to 42.5. That was part
Mr.
of the discussion.
Vanderwall,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't necessarily care about the amount. I just wanted to know which positions.
Okay,
So
so
that we
those
could
two-
preserve, I could,
And, okay, go ahead. And then in addition, I've already, Ms. Nora Davis we've moved her to a full-time position. We have to. We're without a finance officer right now. She's doing a fantastic job, and there was a slight bump to her pay as well in that, moving her into that position. So, again, I would love to chat with Councilman Gregory if he feels like there's something that I'm trying to pull here, because I'm not.
Hold it, Douglas. So let me ask you a question. Mr. Brennan, is there a way that we can, if we indeed pass Mr. Gregory's item to pull out, when we go back, we can adjust the budget at any time when we actually vet this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Chief, question for you. I'm sorry you're leaving. I think I told you that 100 times. But what I want to know is in the promotions and everything involved, was that built into the items that were needed to move your program forward as far as your future promotions?
Yeah, that's actually, Mayor, you reminded me, converting the sergeant position to a lieutenant position, there was a $7,000 salary increase on that, so.
Okay, guys, so no matter what, if Douglas's thing passes, I strongly,
We're not talking about
strongly-
moving from one position to another. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm
we're
talking
talking
about,
about outright raises. I hear you. I
I'm just
get
talking
it.
about outright raises in a position that you have now, that you had
I know,
last
but
year.
if we pass your thing, it knocks out the money that was going to be used. Am I talking right? Yeah, but if we pass the thing that no 2% for the next
That's
year.
not what the
That would-
motion
That
said.
wouldn't figure into that.
Are you sure?
Yes, because if you're moving from A to B, that's not a promotion in salary, that's a change of position. So
Am
that's
I
not a-
misunderstanding this motion? I understand that anything in the budget above 2% isn't going to be considered.
That's the way he worded the motion, to my understanding.
That other position will get a salary increase, will also get a COLA.
I just want to make sure that we're very clear that these
No, this
promotions
has
that are
nothing
coming
to
up
do with
in
moves
the
like
police
that.
department aren't affected by this action that we take now.
But it would, this is the 2018 budget, and the promotion's going to happen this year in 2017. So naturally, as the new budget comes in, that would be affected. They would only have what you're saying, the 2% COLA.
But it would already be set.
It would already be set. Never mind, sorry.
It will already be set. Thank you, Douglas, for the clarification. Okay. We have a motion and we have a second on the table. Leslie, you were signed up for this item. Did you want to speak on it, please? It's still a continuation of, oh, you're right, sorry. That's what happens when you get 63. Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote on Douglas's amendment to pull that out of the thing. We're going to start on the left with Mr. Trevino.
No?
No.
No. Oh, sorry, no.
And there was a 2% COLA. Right, okay,
Which has no effect on moves from one position to another.
right. So we have a no, 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 no. And Douglas, I'm assuming you're going to say yes? Oh, good, okay. All right, good, all right, the item stays.
Mr.
And-
Mayor?
Yes,
We're talking employees. Can I say just something?
why not? We open the door.
Well, again, there's been an awful lot of misinformation, and I'd like to clarify that so that the people that are listening understand what really has been going on. Since 2015, we had approximately 71 employees. It depends on whether the position was filled, not filled, but the slots were there. that's 2015. 2017, we're at the same number. So the reason I mention this is because we keep hearing about, well, last year we added 7, this year we want to add 4, this year we want to do this and that. If you got questions, just come to us and ask. We are not overstaffed, period. We aren't overstaffed. You want to show and tell, call me. I'll be glad to come up and walk with you and show you. We are not overstaffed. Staff is doing a great job. They're busy as devil. The only fluctuation, for example, in 2015, the police department had 19 on the books, but they had an open slot. Police department in this year, they filled that slot, they got 20. So, I mean, we're all right there in the same neighborhood we've been. I don't really understand why we're having all this conversation about 50 employees being hired or some junk. Anyway, just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Okay, so we just left in the budget the salaries. Mr. Brennan, because council voted no, do we need to set a COLA now? Because
It's my understanding that there's already a 2% COLA in there, plus there's other salary adjustments.
There you go.
And he was trying to get rid of the salary adjustments per position, I think, and just cap everything at 2%. But that
Based on the vote by
that was
council,
defeated.
based on the vote by council, the adjustments stay in place. Okay, let's go on to.
Mayor, we need a roll call vote on that per the local government code. So,
I thought we just had one.
you did a roll call? Okay, good.
We did on the amendment, but not on the budget.
Yeah, but on the budget itself, that's it.
Okay. All right, Douglas, was there anything else you wanted to bring forward as far as an amendment to the budget?
All this that we've been going through tonight, I was hoping we would be thrashing out in the workshop.
Me too.
This is better than what we had been presented. I'm really of two minds, I really am. You can't get everything you want, but
Well, 2 out of 3
I
ain't
did get
bad.
the important things that I wanted. And
1 out of 3.
I'm of two minds. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Thank you for your input and the homework you did. So we're on item 4, finally. Consider and act upon the ordinance of 2017-09-12D, adopting the 2018 operating budget and the cost of living allowance for the city of Castle Hills with the items that have been adjusted due to vote by council. This is a roll call vote on the budget. Mr. Trevino, for the total budget as presented with the adjustments.
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Ms. McLean,
Yes.
Mr. Paul? Mr. Gregory? Thank you. We have a unanimous vote on the operating budget for 2018. And thank you, council. We're going to move on to item number 5, consider and act upon an ordinance 201-709-12E, adopting the proposed 2017 tax rate of .501345 per $100 of taxable evaluation. The proposed 2017 tax rate will raise property income $212,995 or 6.2% in the amount of $34,730 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to this 2017 tax roll. Mr. Vanderwalde.
Yes, this was briefed at 2 public hearings. to go with the existing tax rate for the budget. This is what the budget you've just approved is based upon. So this would approve, this is our 2018 tax rate, right, Minerva?
Okay,
2017 tax rate, okay.
okay.
Of .501345 per $100 of taxable valuation. So we've had the discussion. If anybody's subject to your questions, I'd be happy to respond if you want to ask any
I
questions.
think we beat this one up enough. In fact, we've already passed it. Oh, we didn't? Oh, we need to adopt it, okay. All right, so, Mr. Gregory, do you have any comments on this tax evaluation, please? Need a motion, please, before we get started?
Mayor?
Yes.
There has to be special wording for this motion to adopt the tax rate. Now, Minnie, did that motion get out? Because if not, I can read it.
I read it, but I can read it again.
Yeah, you've got to use exact words that were
Okay, here we go.
I move that we consider and act upon ordinance number 2017-09-12-E, adopting the proposed 2017 tax rate of .50135/ per $100 of taxable valuation. The proposed tax rate will raise more property taxes by $212,995 or 6.2%.
Okay,
Read it again. You didn't read it right. It was not read right.
okay. You want to read it again? Consider and act upon the ordinance of number 2017-09-12-D, adapting the FY 2018 operating budget and the cost of living allowance for the city of Castle Hills. That's the
Mayor,
wrong damn thing.
Mayor,
I mean, wrong thing.
can I read you the motion the way it needs
Yes,
to be? And
please
then somebody can say, I make that motion.
There you go.
But the motion says, I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.501345, which is effectively a 6.22% increase in the tax rate, period. That's all you have to say.
Okay.
I move.
Motion.
Okay, a second?
Douglas.
You did second? Okay. This is a roll call vote. Mr. Trevino?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Why not?
Mr. Brennan, as I understand, residents that are over 65, will their taxes go up based on this?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so because I've received a handful of emails about people concerned with their taxes going up. And I checked the property addresses that they're listed to, and the majority of them were over 65. So I just wanted everybody to understand that the city is not raising taxes. It's just the property values that have gone up, which has effectively raised the amount of taxes paid.
Yeah, the freeze or the cap is a dollar cap. It's not a rate cap, it's a dollar cap.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Scott, do you have any comments before we move forward?
I just want to clarify the record that I go ahead and second because I had originally moved to
Okay.
motion.
Ms.
Just
Scott
so
did
it's-
the second, in case we're wondering.
Yes, but no, I have no other.
Ms. McLean, did you have any?
No.
Mr. Paul? Douglas, do you have anything? Obviously, you don't, because you made the motion. Okay, this is a roll call vote. Mr. Trevino?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Paul? Yes. Mr. Gregory? Yes. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on to item number 7, which is consider and act upon ordinance number 2017-09-12-G, adopting a policy for copious public information request. Copy, did I say that word wrong? Okay, guys, it's getting late.
Can we take a coffee break, please? Can I grab a coffee?
Okay, we're going to item 6. Go ahead. You want to read it? You don't? Okay, I'll read it. We're on item 6, is that correct? Consider and act upon an ordinance number 2017-09-12F, ratifying the FY 2017 operating budget, raising more property tax than last year's budget by $212,995 or 6.22%. and of the amount, $34,730 is tax revenue to be raised from new property tax added to the 2017 tax roll.
So move the motion.
Second. Who's seconding?
Second.
Mayor,
Yes.
did I understand you to read that you're ratifying the 2018 operating budget?
No, 2017.
Well, it's written
It
here
it should be
2017.
18. You're ratifying the 2018 operating budget.
So what do we do, Mr. Brennan, when this was put out as a 2017?
That was a clerical error, Mr. Gregory. All of the conversation on the budget and all the materials are that the budget is, for next year, is the one being adopted, not the one for this current year.
Okay, folks, we're going to reread this. Consider and act upon ordinance number 2017-09-12F, ratifying correction due to clerical error, the 2018 operating budget, raising property tax more than last year's budget by $212,995, or 6.22%, and of that amount, $34,730 is tax revenue to be raised from new property tax added to the 2018,
17.
oh,
tax.
17 tax roll.
Yes.
I so move the motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Consider and act upon an ordinance 2017-09-12G, adopting the policy for copious public information request. Mr. Vanderwalde,
I did not bring this forward, Mayor.
who
so-
brought it forward?
This is something that I brought up. According to the Texas Government Code, as a city, we're entitled to adopt an ordinance that if a single citizen, a single person requests their 12-month, over a 12-month period, if they request or their public information requests exceed 36 hours of time for our personnel, we are entitled to adopt an ordinance which allows us to then charge them for time once they hit that 36-hour mark. And there are certain requirements, and the ordinance that was published contains those requirements.
Okay. All right. So with that said, do I have a motion for this item, please?
I motion.
Second?
Second.
Thanks. You want to go into discussion, Douglas?
Why are we doing this?
Well,
We're a small town. I mean, this is not, we've got armies of people come lining up. I mean, we may get one or two, but I think this is, well, just why are we doing this?
well, I didn't bring this forward, but the situation is we have some people who do an unusually large amounts of open records request. And so what happens is we talk about people not being able to do their jobs, people spending hours on this thing. And so we've got to have some kind of mechanism in place in order to get paid for it. And on one particular situation, I don't know, Minnie, you want to throw in how many hours you worked on one particular situation? Fifteen, 20 hours a week on open meetings request, and she's sitting there. I know. Kurt, how many comp hours does she have at this time? Just rough numbers, please.
Probably 234. That's what
234
pops to
hours.
mind, yeah.
Where's Mr. McCormick? Oh, he already left. We scared him off. You talk about hours, you talk about why people don't get their jobs done, you talk about different things like that. And, you know, we come up with a situation where we're required by law to give these open meetings requests. But when they become a situation where they override what we have employees doing, like 20 hours of a 40-hour week in one case, usually runs somewhere around 15 is what I'm told, 15 hours a week. So we're held accountable. There's no doubt that the open meetings requests are just as important, or people need to know. We understand that. But if one person asks more than a certain amount, then they've got to pay for it.
It just seems to me that this is so easily circumvented.
How?
It says a requester. So you can get, if they're, yeah, per person. So if you have a household where there's 6 in the household, each individual person can run up all this thing.
I
mean,
guess you
that's-
could if you want to work the system.
I mean, as I say, this has, I mean, the holes are that wide for people to run through it.
Well, I'll tell you.
You can
it's,
have it, but I
If people want to
don't think
work the system and scam the city,
Well, if that's the case, we'll end up altering it and tighten those holes for you. We'll tighten the holes for you if that becomes an issue.
well, hopefully this sends out a message. Leslie?
I do understand that this can be a problem. One of the problems, however, that we've had here recently that we did not have previously is that we haven't been able to post the information that should be on the website. If we would simply do that and provide information at meetings, you will find that the number of requests will drop down.
Thank you. I would ask, when we move forward, or however y'all decide on this item, that we're talking about, and I know that we're talking about enhancing our website. We're talking about getting other people involved in it, how we're going to help Minnie and the people who control our website. I have a website. I know it's a pain. And it takes a lot of work. I could spend 15 hours a week on my website, and I can't imagine what the city would do. So we will come to your rescue on that and have people to help in order to put things on the website to help get more information out to the public. Okay, we have a motion, I believe, and we have a second, and we're going to do just a regular vote on this. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Leslie, thank you for your input. Okay, new business, conduct a public hearing on the application from the Christian School at Castle Hills located at 2216 Northwest Military to amend the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 50, to add, in parentheses, 5-day nursery, preschool, or kindergarten in conjunction with a public, private, or denominational school having a curriculum equivalent to grades 1 through 12 of a public school, close parentheses, at the end of section 50-497, in parentheses, A, to repeal section 50-497, in parentheses, B, in parentheses, 1, and renumber section 50-497, in parentheses, B, accordingly. Whew. Okay, it is now, we're opening the public hearing. It is now 9:45. It's item 8 on the agenda. First, we had, actually, we had John Kinney signed up. John, I know you're out there in TV land because I just got a text from you. Hope all is well, but we're not going to do a Skype in here yet. We're not to that level yet. Okay, so next we have Leslie Winger.
Mayor, do you mind if I release the department heads and our finance officer? They've been here since 7:30 and this morning, so. If I-
Let me see what else.
This is really, it's really zoning actions and stuff that doesn't involve them necessarily from here on out, so.
We have Mr. Isbrand here. Hi, Joe. Consider a public hearing on the thing, primary use, conduct a public hearing on that, public hearing
No,
on
you
that.
stay.
Repeal, okay with me, if it's okay with you. If anybody objects, I guess we could object.
You know, Mr. Mayor, the next time, I'm going to bring that gallon of Grand Marnier.
Here you
And
go.
we're going to have coffee with Grand Marnier. We can last till midnight around here.
Pretty cool. Okay, ladies. Oh, there's coffee in there.
Oh, God.
Well, what I'd like to do is get the Christian school started and get it out of here, okay? Okay, we have a councilman that would like a 2-minute, 3-minute break. And Mr. Paul, anyone out there in the crowd like a cup of coffee on a fuzzy and get to know each other. But we have to get moving. So with that said, it's now 10 o'clock and we're coming back into session. We started a public hearing at 9:45. I don't think I need to read it again. I think that the Christian School is ready to make their presentation. Mr. Pinkston?
Well, good evening, Mayor Howell and council members, and I thank you for your tireless service tonight and reviewing our proposal, which I'll keep very short. The background on our request is on January 1st, 2016, after 55 years of being a part of the Castle Hills First Baptist Church, our school became a separately incorporated nonprofit independent school. And at the same time, we entered into a 3.5-year lease purchase agreement for 3 of our historic buildings, seen up on the screen, and the land immediately west of our buildings. In that process, we lost one of our buildings housing our early childhood program. As a result of that, we remodeled our Hope building right above the Love building in that diagram and moved our preschool from its longtime historic location in the Faith building. We completed a renovation of the new facility in Hope this past March and moved in April. Through that renovation process, being up and back and forth here with the city staff, we approached them and asked, is there anything we need to do or take care of related to the long-term continuous use of these properties? Meaning, are there any T's to cross or I's to dot along the way? City staff had several solid recommendations, one of which was to approach the Zoning and Planning Committee to seek our separate special use permit. In fact, we were approved for that in the Zoning Commission last week. One additional note for clarity, this request does not include the Grist property outlined in blue on the screen behind you, which we now own, as we do not at this time have any plans as to the use of that property. We are making this special use permit request for 2 reasons. One, to allow the continuation of the preschool and the grades K to 12 that have historically occupied those premises since the school's inception back in 1961. And 2, to request the City of Castle Hills amend the zoning code, section 50-497, to include the opportunity to request designation for special uses for day nurseries, preschools, or kindergartens in conjunction with an existing public, private, or denominational school having an equivalent of up to grades 1 to 12. There will be no change in use. We've only moved the preschool children from one building to another that's been in use for the school for decades. We humbly ask for you to approve this request for a special use permit that allows us to continue our mission to reach, teach, and train boys and girls and teens, hopefully for another 55 years. Thank you for allowing us to bring this request, and if you have any questions or further information, be glad to try to help.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkston. Okay, this is a public hearing. As I said, John Kinney was signed up. Thank you, John, for letting me know you're not coming up. Ms. Winger was signed up. Ms. Winger, is she there? Yes, okay. Ms. Winger did leave. And so is there anyone else who would like to speak on this matter? Council, no, we don't, council doesn't talk on this, right, Mike? Yeah, I learned my lesson on that. Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, twice, last call?
Mayor, I just wanted to make a note that this was, went before the zoning commission last week, and it was approved to move to council with a vote of 3-2 for this initiative.
Okay, so it went to council?
It went through the zoning commission.
3-2.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, if there's nobody else who wants to say anything, which you can't
Is
say
the
anything.
zoning chairman, did he leave also?
Yes, he left.
Yes, he left. Okay, so with that said, it is now 10:04. And the 10:04, boy, that coffee really helped. Okay, and we're closing the public hearing. So we're moving to item 11.
We need to vote.
Item 9, just kidding.
Don't.
Okay. Item 8, yeah, that's what I said.
And I make a motion to move to item 8.
Let it rip.
Second.
Mayor,
We have to.
Consider and act upon an ordinance number 2, yes, sir?
let's see, do y'all have the ordinance that goes with item 8? It's somewhere in this book. Okay.
Oh, we already said what was being changed in the public hearing.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that, without seeing it, that people can really understand.
It's
that.
item 9, Douglas. It's item 9, it's the next item. That's just the presentation. The ordinance is the next one.
Yeah, they just had the public hearing under item 8.
Yes.
Okay,
The next one is item number 9.
okay, you're
Mike.
going to have the public hearing on that?
No, because we've already had a public hearing. We were going to invite a motion in order to pass it, after I read it.
Okay, but we got to find the ordinance for it.
It's right here. Go one more page. No, in there. It comes on the item 9. Right there. This is the ordinance I think you're looking for, right? So
Okay.
Just held the public hearing.
They just held it, in my book, if you look behind number 9, not the front page of 9, but the next page of 9, it's ordinance 2017-09-12,
H.
H. That ordinance adopts the recommendation that was in public hearing number 8. That was
That's
just held.
correct, and we just had public hearing number 8.
Okay, the ordinance 2017-09-12H makes that adoption or amendment to the code. And what it does, it adds the right to operate a day nursery, preschool, or kindergarten in conjunction with an existing public, private, or denominational school having a curriculum equivalent to grades 1 through 12 of a public school. That authority about that public school 1 through 12 is where the main focus of the discussion was at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And they massaged some wording in there to say that there had to be an existing public, private, or denominational school having a curriculum 1 through 12 to have a daycare, preschool, or kindergarten in a residential A zoning district. And that the Zoning Commission recommended approval of that addition to your code.
That's the way I read it, Mr. Brennan. Do I need to read the number 9 ordinance as brought forward?
I don't think so, as long as everybody understands that the public hearing for item 8 is the ordinance that happens to be in number 9.
Got it. Okay, so we're voting on item 9.
Yes, sir.
Yes?
In 50 words or less. This was a split vote at zoning.
Yes.
What exactly is being changed in 50 words or less?
Okay. Under the prior code, you can't have a daycare or a day nursery, a preschool, or kindergarten in a residential A district. And, you know, you understand that. People don't want some neighbor in a house saying all of a sudden, I'm going to have a daycare in my house. People don't want that. Okay, but I think the Zoning Commission was sympathetic to the request of the Christian school to operate a daycare, preschool, or kindergarten in a residential A district because they've already been doing it for 50 years or something. Okay, the only way to get there was to add this addition to the code that permits daycare, nursery, or preschool in a residential A district. The concern of the Zoning Commission was, how are we going to limit that or restrict that to where not every other neighbor starts operating a daycare school? They said the way you get there is to say you have to already have an existing public, private, or denominational school with a whole full 1 through 12 school there. And if you analyze where are those in the city of Castle Hills, There's not any, except, you know, here and maybe one other place over there on Antonian or something.
So if you have a hypothetical, and the properties where the Love and Hope buildings are,
Yes, sir.
if the church decides, you know, we need that for something else, can they then go to any residential neighborhood and buy a house and put a daycare center there?
No, that's what he just said.
No, he said,
No,
No,
no, the
that's
code
not-
is being amended to where, but it's got to be an existing, which means existing on the date of the adoption of this ordinance, so.
the daycare center.
The high
No,
school.
the public school, 1 through 12,
the public
has
school,
to be in existence
I
on the day
understand
of the adoption of this ordinance.
Well, why would it prohibit them from going to any neighborhood, buying any house, and saying, we've been here for years, we're closing down these two buildings, and we want to have another building over here in this smack dab in the middle of this neighborhood?
Well,
Could they do that?
no, because existing means it has to be in existence on the date of this adoption of this ordinance, and existence at that location, not at just.
Oh, at that
they-
location.
Yeah, what's the other school, basis, they can't go buy a house somewhere and start a 1 through 12 school, and then say, now, in addition, we want to have a daycare. You
So
can't
they
do
would
that.
not be able to close one or two of these buildings and buy a house further on down the road.
Yeah.
And say, this is our new location for this, where we have the kid could not do that.
No,
Because that's what the other church did. They bought up all of Ivywood Circle before anybody knew what was going on and just destroyed the street.
well, is that over there on Wayside? Is that what you're talking about? Well, they don't have an existing 1 through 12 public school or
No, but they
denomination.
bought houses through, and they bought houses on the whole street, so there's now only 2 houses left that are private.
Well, that's not a good analogy because it's
Yeah,
totally
careful,
different
you helped
facts.
him with that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Well, and
Truth
then
is hell, man.
the second step of all this is, even though it's authorized in the code, you have to get an SUP to do it. So you all have a second bite at the apple. You know, they've got to come in here and ask for an SUP to do this, which a Christian school is doing. But to get them there, to be able to continue what they're already doing, their code had to be amended this way.
So there's absolutely no way they can move from this physical boundary.
No, no. They have to, on today's date, there has to be a 1 through 12 public school at that location.
Thank you.
2 quick questions, and possibly, I don't know who's going to answer this. We don't have to, if we do this, then in the future, if they decide to leave and move to another location, what does that do to the zoning at this location? Does it just go back to residential?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, right now, they've been operating this school as a non-conforming use, which means it's not authorized specifically for that zoning district. But they're a new legal entity
Right.
asking the city to approve a new entity, I mean, a new business or a new,
They just changed their name doing the same thing.
well, yeah, but it's more than a name change. They're a
Right.
new legal entity.
That's
They're
what I
a-
mean.
They're a new nonprofit corporation with a charter issued by the state of Texas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Anybody else? Nope.
What about traffic? Is any traffic consideration being used now that these 2 buildings are going to be up and they want to use this for this? Traffic for these 2 buildings and the occupants? Because there's going to be, I would think, a lot of people dropping off kids in the daycare in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning and have a substantial increase of traffic in that neighborhood that's already got a pile of traffic.
This has already been a
We've
use
already
in that
addressed that.
area.
Yeah,
This
Has
was-
it already been addressed?
We've already addressed that with Mr. Pinkston and Dan, and they came up and showed us what, because they have a back entrance that they use in the neighborhood, okayed that and everything. Right?
It's a
Right.
pre-existing school.
And I've been out several mornings to observe traffic at the Basis and Christian School facility, and it seems to be flowing very smoothly at their facility. It's currently in operation with all of these entities currently happening.
I'll go further than that. I said it'd never work. Mr. Pinkston prayed, and look what happened.
Careful. Move a little away where that bolt hits you.
Okay.
No, I can't do.
So we have a motion and a second on the table to,
Do we? We don't.
we don't,
Not yet.
okay,
I tried to do it too early, and Mr. Brennan caught me.
okay. You want to read this or
If
consider
you
an
don't
act
want to read it,
upon an
I'll
ordinance
gladly read it.
2017-09-12H?
Consider an act upon ordinance number 2017-09-12-H, amending Chapter 50, adding, quote, in parentheses 5, day nursery, preschool, or kindergarten in conjunction with an existing public, private, or denominational school having a curriculum equivalent to grades 1 through 12 of a public school, end quote. At the end of Section 50-497, parentheses A, to repeal Sections 50-497, parentheses B, parentheses 1, and renumber it Section 50-497, parentheses B accordingly.
Okay, do we have a motion for that item, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Was Mr. Trevino and Mr. McGlynn. Okay, any discussion? Guess not. Okay, with that said, let's have a vote. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Pinkston. Go build a school.
We have to vote on
Not done yet.
SUP.
The next action, Mayor, is for the SUP, for the application for the SUP.
Conduct a public hearing on an application from the Christian School at Castle Hills, located at 2216 Northwest Military Highway, legal description CB 5778, Block 1, Lot 29, for the special use permit SUP for a day nursery, preschool, or kindergarten, and a denominational school having a curriculum equivalent to grades 1 through 12. It is now 10:15, and we are going to open a public hearing. There is no one signed up for this item. We'll allow anyone want to speak? Okay, good. All right, so with that said, it is now 10:16, and we're going to close that public hearing. We're going to consider an act upon on item number 11, an ordinance of 2017-909-12-I for the special use permit SUP for the Christian School at Castle Hills, located at 2216 Northwest Military Drive, legal description CB 5778, Block 1, Lot 29, for a day nursery, preschool, or kindergarten, and an existing denominational school having a curriculum equivalent to grades 1 through 12 of a public school. I will invite a motion.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. McGlynn, a second by Ms. Scott. Any discussion? Nope.
This is exciting because this is where it actually locks them into that specific lot with their special use permit. Where you were asking before, can they pick it up, move it? Well, their special use permit states that they have to leave it on that particular lot, according to the ordinance.
That's exciting. Okay, is there any other?
Answer Mr. Gregory's question, but I had a feeling you were going to ask it.
And Mayor, I don't want to belabor anything, but I call Mr. Gregory's attention to item 4 on the second page of this ordinance that says continuously during the operation of this school that sufficient parking and ingress and egress to Northwest Military Highway shall continuously be available while the school is in operation. I know that doesn't set up an exact traffic pattern, but in the judgment of the city, the traffic has to be handled appropriately.
Do they have to comply with the requisite number of parking spaces as per?
Yes, they're subject to all the zoning code regulations already in existence.
Mr. Gregory, they've got, if you look in the folder, their whole plan that they proposed, you'll see graphics that show the traffic patterns and parking and all kinds of things for their lots, if you're interested.
Are we done, Douglas?
10 seconds. Frank will count off the number. I've got it. Councilman Paul.
Mayor Howell, to you.
All right.
I'm going to sleep better at night now. Okay, so we have a motion on the table by these two. We've had discussion. Anybody else? Thanks. All in favor? It is unanimous. Go build a school. You bet, Mr. Pinkston. Thank you for your time and for waiting this whole time. Okay, now we're getting into the last item, or close to the last. This is for conduct a public hearing on the application from Wedgewood Senior Apartments LLC to repeal Section 50-2253, establish a minimum size for an apartment unit, amend Section 50-227, in parentheses D3, to reduce minimum lot area for high-rise apartments for 1,500 square feet to 800 square feet per dwelling unit. Amend Section 50-227F to reduce the minimum requirement of off-street parking places spaces from 2 cars per dwelling to a unit of 1.3 cars per dwelling unit. Amend Section 50-228A to exempt front yard fence height limitations from applicability of Section 5-66 to the D high-rise apartment district, and repealing Section 50-228B. We'll open this hearing at 10:19. Nobody is signed up to, what? Okay, well, let's have a presentation. What was the recommendation on zoning for this?
It was 5-0. It was 5-0. It was
To
approved 5-0.
move forward?
Yes, to approve it.
Don't worry, we have
I
it.
have it completely figured out.
It's not complicated.
No.
No, it's not.
Mm-mm.
Okay. What are we waiting on here? Oh, well, hurry up, will you?
It's not complicated.
He was just pissed off. You know, Joe? You're ready to fire him.
Mayor, we're ready to proceed if you are.
Yes, sir. We're ready
Okay.
when you are, sir.
Okay, but
Thank you.
Just for the record, I'm Bill Kaufman with Kaufman and Killen, and we've been employed to help the Wedgewood Apartments with this matter. And first of all, I know it's late in the hour. I can give you the shorter version, and happy to go into as much detail as you'd like, but I know it's late. I don't want to prolong it. If you need more. This is just an aerial of, you all know where the Wedgewood is, right off 410 on Blanco. The apartments were built in 1965 for 305 units. And the only thing that materially happened in 30 years after that the city adopted the current code and established this site as a D high-rise apartment district. To our knowledge, it is the only D high-rise apartment district in Castle Hills. It's approximately 8 acres. Everybody thought things were fine until recently when they were with prospective developers are looking to renovate the Wedgwood. We discovered 4 areas that when the code was adopted in 95, it didn't follow the existing building. In other words, the code changes put the building out of compliance. No one knew it. No one knew it for 30 years. No one knew it for 50 years, 52 years. But in scrubbing this, it became apparent there were 4 issues, which I'm going to talk about. All we're asking you to do is to, subject to building codes and fire codes and the like, to take the building as built and make it legal conforming. It had 305 units in 1965. Today it has 305 units, and that's not changed. In fact, we've committed throughout this that the unit count will not increase in that building. So the 305 units today, there's a likelihood there'll be less units as units are combined in size as they renovate it. Each prospective buyer has different thoughts on how to do that, but in no case will we increase the number of units in the building. The building is presently on the tax rolls, I think, for $4 or $5 million. At one time, it was closer to $15 million. I was mindful of the discussion earlier tonight on other matters looking to enhance income-producing opportunities. In this case, we anticipate that the buyers, whoever it is going to spend well north of $20, possibly $30 million to renovate it. It's a big project. Of course, whatever that's on the tax rolls will be an improvement over today. This is just an old photo of the Wedgwood in its grandeur. I remember visiting my grandfather there probably shortly after it was built. I didn't realize that until recently, but he was one of the first tenants. The grounds today, if you've not had an opportunity to look at it, are being kept up, and the pool's being kept up, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But there were 4 issues that when the code was adopted, put it out of compliance. No fault of the owners, they didn't do anything, but the drafters of the code didn't bother apparently to check with the Wedgwood and ask them, what we're doing, does it conform to your building? It just is one of those things. It happens. We don't know how it happened, and really not material at this point, but we're asking council to support the decision of the recommendation of the zoning commission to make 4 modifications to your D zoning code to put the building back into compliance and allow it to be sold for renovation. The first one is minimum size of apartments. There's a 700 in the code, 700 square feet minimum for 1 bedroom. The truth of the matter is, in the Wedgwood, there are 84 units that are less than 700 square feet, substantially less, and we're merely asking that that provision be changed and removing the minimum. What we've agreed to ensure that all those units are not going to be small, that we're going to keep the same, the count won't increase. In other words, nobody can come in and take the bigger units and chop them up to make more small units, because that would increase more apartments. And so the number is going to remain not to exceed the same 305 units. The second area was a calculation that y'all, for some reason, you have in your code. We don't experience it often in addressing density, and that is a calculation not by per unit, but how many square feet of land do you have to have per unit. And it's done, but it's not done frequently. What that would prevent is if the developer wanted to add retail, which we've been encouraged to do by a number of residents in the area, restaurants and the like, or high-end townhomes, that we would be violating that calculation. So we've come up with a 800 square foot. It really just to allow a little more density on the property, but again, not in the building, because we're not going to increase the number of units. The third is we have to make sure there's sufficient parking on site. There was a variance, I believe, was that 2004? 2004 for parking. It's been addressed in the past, but this is a proposal 1.3 per unit, which is really what modern codes are doing from apartments. In the old days, you know, when I was a baby lawyer, you know, you assumed 2 people lived in every unit and everybody had a car, and that's just not the case anymore. That some people don't have any cars. A lot of singles, they don't have 2 cars, they just have 1 car. But we're finding across the country that this 1.3 for maximum is 1.3 minimum is pretty much a standard. You're also protected. If this was in a neighborhood, you'd worry about if they don't have enough parking where people are going to park, and they're going to park on the streets and parking from somebody's house. In this case, they're in a commercial area. It's well bounded and can accommodate all the parking they need on site. So that's that. And the final, kind of minor, but there's a provision in there that you can't have a front yard fence. And that's really geared to, you know, residential districts. You don't want somebody blocking off the neighborhood with everybody having a fence in the front yard. Of course, as you know, there's a fence surrounding the building, so it's a technical issue. But we've recommended language to cure that, to make sure someone doesn't take the position that that fence doesn't belong. So with that, we'd ask your concurrence with the zoning commission's recommendation. Allow us to make the code to be revised, to make that building in conformity the way it was intended to be. Allow it to be renovated and bring a first-class project to your city and your skyline. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about the project or any of these items. Thank you.
What? You got questions too, right? Oh, it's a public hearing. Never mind, sorry. Anybody want to talk? Laverne? Go ahead. Yes. Why don't you come to the microphone, Laverne? I want to hear that voice of yours. Please.
Laverne Jaffets, 12 Shady Cove. I was reading the application, or the way it's written here. It's talking about taking what evidently at the time when they were built was 1,500 square feet and turning it into 800, which makes almost double the amount. No square footage, of course, but making 2 apartments out of 1. I didn't hear him explain that part just now. The other thing might be that I wanted to know if they're going to be for rent. Are they rentals? Are they going to be sold? And then I'd like to have the square footage again explained about it's the difference in the application. What did the application call for? Like it says here? Ask for 1,500 square feet to be reduced to 8. Did you all hear that? I'd just like some information, what they intend to rent or to sell. It's a beautiful area, or I had my aunt there for a while. I think it was great to be for elderly people. I think it'd be the only one in town. It'd be great for that. I'm just concerned about when you cut the units up to 800 square feet. Of course, they can rent for less, and I'm sure if you're going to sell them, that they would be less than for 1,500. And then on the other hand, what bothers me a little bit, 'cause I've been in the rental business, et cetera, for a while. Every time I have a rent sign out available for my units to be rented, I get a dozen calls from the government the state, the housing project, trying to figure out, but I will not rent to them. I don't even consider it, but this would be a great big area for housing, and I just kind of hate to see that go into our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
I'd like to have the question answered, though, on the square footage.
Mr. Collins, yes, sir. Could you answer?
Yes, ma'am, I'd be happy to. We went over it very, very quickly, and it's not surprising. That calculation is not, it really is they look at the land, not the units. That 800 square feet means 800 square feet of land per unit. And that's just to make sure the calculation is correct. Remember, the commitment is we're not increasing the number of units. So you take down one unit and cut it in half and make 2 out of it, you're going to exceed the number of units. So they're not going to be more small units. Conversely, there's going to be more larger units and less total units. They are going to be for rent, available to seniors and, people live in Castle Hills that are looking for alternative lifestyle. I happen to live in a high-rise. I've lived in 2. It's a lifestyle choice. It's kind of a lock it and leave it. Our people today, when I grew up, the goal was to own a house. Didn't matter who built it. If I owned a house, I'd made it. But the trends are changing. People don't want to stay home and mow the grass. Weekends, they're worried about property taxes going up and up and up. And this, if you look at single-family ownership in the United States, it goes down every year. And this is a wonderful opportunity that the building exists. It's been this number of units for 52 years or so. It's not caused anybody a problem. And I think it will reflect well on your community, and I think you'll be proud of what the renovation turns out to be. I think I got the 2 questions, but.
Okay. I understood the explanation, and so, we can't respond. We're going to respond in the actual consider and act portion. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak up in the, yes, ma'am?
Good evening. I'll only take a minute. My name's Brenda Jackson. I live at 307 Zornia, and I want to speak as an advocate for this, having had many friends and parents of friends who've lived at the Wedgwood over the years, who were really devastated because of the fire and having to have their family members displaced. I'm delighted that there is an effort to extensively remodel the facility and make more useful space for patients. And I'll speak as a nursing advocate. I have a doctorate in adult health and gerontological nursing. And one of the things that I do is I work with people that are referred to me from my church and other people I know in the community who know I'm a nurse and will call me and ask me questions. And one of the things that they're looking for in affordable housing for elders is something that is arranged for people who do not need to be going up and down and around in large spaces. There's an emphasis right now on downsizing and having things built so that they're safe facilities for people who have minimal disabilities. I'm not talking nursing home skill facilities. And I think what they're talking about doing and downsizing the apartments makes a lot of sense. It looks to me, when I first read through it, that they would be looking at 1-bedroom efficiency type of apartments primarily. And that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And so I would support relooking at the code to facilitate rehabilitating the Wedgwood apartments so that they will be an appropriate and safe senior living facility in the future.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak before we actually move into the motion part of this? Thank you. Okay, we're going to close this public hearing. It is now 10:36. And we're going to move on to item 13, which is consider and act upon ordinance number 2017-0912-J to repeal section 50225-3, establishing a minimum size for apartment units, amending section 50227D3 to reduce minimum lot area for high-rise apartments from 1,500 square feet to 800 square feet per dwelling unit, amending section 50227F to reduce minimum requirement of off-street parking spaces from 2 cars per dwelling unit to 1.3 cars per dwelling unit, amending section 50228A to exempt front yard fence height limitations from applicability of section 5066 to D high-rise apartment district and repealing section 50228B. I invite a motion on this.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Could I make a comment before you get a motion? If you look behind, in your book behind 13, tab 13, there's 2 ordinances that the staff, I would say, has prepared or submitted to you all for consideration. The first ordinance in there is kind of the short one. It's like a page and a fourth or so. And that ordinance tracks literally the recommendation of the zoning commission, which also was the request of the Wedgewood owners. The problem with that is that it repeals out of your existing code several provisions that, in my judgment, are important, like minimum sizes of apartments and so forth. So we redrafted another version of the same ordinance that it's a second one, and it's about, a page and almost 2 pages. It accomplishes exactly the same thing, or at least it's intended to accomplish exactly the same thing that the Wedgewood applicants have requested. But it also leaves in your code the existing provisions that were adopted, as he said, back in 1995, and so that the second ordinance applies to projects that were in existence on today's date, September 12, 2017. It lets the Wedgewood have whatever they wanted to do their improvements. But then it says that after today's date, any future high-rise D projects that come to the city would still be bound by the regulations that are currently in your code. And I personally think it's a mistake to drop all those regulations out of the code for the benefit of the Wedgewood application, because you all may have future applications for other high-rise D apartments, and you're going to be sitting there with a code that doesn't require minimum sizes of apartments and things like that. So, and also for full disclosure, when the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission saw this second ordinance that left in the old stuff of the code, it just carved it out for the Wedgewood, he was very upset and felt like that there was somehow some collusion or something to bypass the zoning commission, because the zoning commission never said anything about what happens to the old code sections that went away or were being bypassed or carved out in this application, and felt like that the Wedgewood carve-out ought to be all that was discussed. Eliminate the code provisions that conflicted with the Wedgewood, and don't worry about the future projects. And I feel a little bad about that, because we drafted this second one to carve out the Wedgewood, let them have what they want, but protect the code for future projects. It may be better, because of the zoning commission hurt feelings sort of about that, not to go with the one that they recommended, and then y'all re-examine this code again in the future, to decide what requirements you may want to have for high-rise D apartments. You know, it was examined in 95. That's where these requirements came up with. Wedgewood has always been exempt from the new requirements. And I'm sure they were good requirements at the time, and I think they ought to be left on the books. But the zoning commission chairman was
So-
offended because that was suggested.
So either way, let me get this straight. So either way, no matter how the code comes down, whatever we decide tonight, the Wedgewood gets what they want.
That's correct. That
Okay.
was the intention.
What, would it be proper to move forward with this particular project and then put on the agenda, one of these council people here, put on the agenda to adjust that code afterwards, or is that the proper way to do
Yes,
it?
that works, and I can tell you why. This should really be a special use permit process, because you're only going to have one or two or three of these at the most in the history of this city. You know, you're not going to have very many of these big 8 or 10 acre projects of large apartments in a small city. And since they're all different, they're all complicated, it's really best to have a special use permit process for those. And what I would suggest is, if you like that idea, you can pass the ordinance, the bare bones ordinance that gets the Wedgewood where they want to be, and then send a message back to the P&Z and ask them to consider adopting a special use process for future projects of this scope and size, because that's what you really should be doing.
Okay.
It's just not in the code that way right now.
Amy, just something to say?
Well, a couple of things. I'm inclined to, even though I understand that zoning didn't consider the proposed ordinance with the changes, I'm not inclined to leave a hole in our codes. I would be more inclined to figure out how to deal with the personal situation with the zoning commission, but I'm not inclined to leave a hole in our codes by just completely getting rid of stuff.
Mayor, before we go any further down the road, I'd like to hear from Mr. Kaufman again, because this has been a fast-moving train over the last couple days, and I want to make sure that they are okay with the language that's being put before council, that it does actually meet Mr. Brennan's intent, which is to kind of, it gives makes the Wedgewood in compliance with our codes, but also leaves the bar in place for further development. So can we ask him his opinion on that first?
Well, I'm thinking aloud, like my dad told me to. Number one, I want it adopted tonight because I don't want to come back. No, I'm kidding. But I think it's really your province how you want to handle it. We can deal with either. We did see this proposed language of the second option that we didn't know about this afternoon, and we've had a chance to talk to Mike, and he and I agreed we could, you know, the commas work out all that if y'all elect to go that route and use his draft. But we've talked about it, and we're both satisfied. We've worked together or against each other or something for 20 or 30 years, but we could make the second proposal workable if that's what you choose to do.
Mayor, can I make one more comment on that? That's correct. I mean, you know, we can polish up the wording in the second option, and it, like Ms. McClend's suggestion, and in my opinion, it's a better way of approaching it than just leaving it bare bones, like the zoning commission recommended. The problem y'all have, if you go bare bones without the requirements in the second ordinance, there's no requirement left for minimum size apartments on your code. So they've said, and I assume, and I guess y'all know, this is all a hypothetical about the future use of this project. There's no specific project that I know of in place to go there. The owners are marketing the property, and they're trying to get it into a configuration, the code into a configuration to where it's marketable to investors for, you know, somebody's going to spend $30 million on a project. So if you go bare bones with what the zoning commission recommended, there's no restriction that would stop them, even though they say there's going to be 305 units, from cutting it into 600 units. They could do that. Now, I don't think they would. I don't think it would be economically feasible, but under the code, that could be done. So that's why I like the second option, because the second option says there's going to be a minimum of 305 unit, a maximum, I'm sorry, minimum,
Well, let me ask you a
at
question.
least 305, maximum.
I especially like the language, the way you worded the fencing on this particular, on the newer draft. I like the wording on the fencing much better. It's more proactive and it's not ambiguous.
Yes.
So what's to stop, I'm just curious, if you're uncomfortable about, come on up. So if you're uncomfortable about the, by doing the bare bones and not, what's to stop us from coming back 3 days from now in an emergency, in a called meeting of a 72-hour meeting and just pushing this through?
Well, I think once y'all
No,
adopt,
the thing I don't like, excuse me, Mike,
well, I just think once you adopt this ordinance, I can't see y'all coming back and re-amending it or changing it in 72 hours or whatever. No. I think we ought to do it one way or the other now, and then
Yeah,
everybody.
I would tend to agree with that, but we've gone around zoning, and, he's expressed the fact that,
Yeah, he was upset.
yeah, I know.
It doesn't really change what the zoning committee decided.
Yes.
It changes the wording of the ordinance that we're adopting to be more proactive. It doesn't really change what zoning has told us their opinion is on the subject. But it doesn't leave us with any holes in our code, because we will not come back to this. It won't get done until it's an emergency and we find out that there's a problem. I mean, it just won't.
I've got a few questions.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry to interrupt
Go
you.
ahead.
Well, there were some proactive things that I wanted to say. When this first came up, months ago, when the first hearing was set, Moretta and I, Mrs. Scott and I, made arrangements to go and tour the Wedgwood because I panicked when I saw that 340 square foot number. I thought, holy smokes, that's ridiculous. Well, it turns out there honestly are lots of units. There are 80-something units in that building that are already that small. They're not asking us to do anything that hasn't existed since the 60s. They just happen to be in non-compliance with the code. And I feel like when we make them in compliance with the code, they will be able, or with our ordinance, they will be able to have a better pool of quality buyers for this product. Because if I were a lawyer advising a client that was going to spend millions and millions of dollars on a building, I would want the building to legally comply with every one of the ordinances that applied to the building. If we don't help them with this, I feel like our pool of buyers potentially, or their pool of buyers, potentially dwindles, and they don't have the same quality. And of course, we all want the building back online. 2 of my kids wanted to stay and speak on the subject, by the way, since I sat through the zoning meeting. They wanted to get up and speak as citizens. They asked if they could speak on this subject because they heard it and they understood what this will do when we have this building back online. So because I had concerns, I went and looked at the building. Mr. Kaufman and Josh, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your last name, and Ms. Fairman, they took us through the building. They showed us what it looks like. And it appeased my mind that they're not asking to have a high-density situation. They're not asking for anything more than what they already have.
What about one of Mrs. Jappett's concern, where if we go ahead and this allows smaller apartments, and they find somebody who would want to make smaller apartments? And
The second ordinance codifies that to where their gentleman's agreement to not have over 305 units is codified in the second ordinance. And that's why I really like it better than the one that was proposed, that zoning, the simple decisions that zoning made have been finessed into the second ordinance, which I think is what we should consider tonight.
I have a few questions. If this ordinance is passed, who does it apply to? The current owner, the next owner, or the subsequent owner?
If you're asking me, it applies to the property. You know, it's a zoning
Property.
code.
Changes law.
Okay.
Who is the prospective buyer? Do we know?
I don't know.
No, sir, you don't know, but there are several suitors, but they couldn't get anyone serious to put it under contract and proceed forward until these 4 items. So these have been the 4 lingering items that have kind of held back the owners for quite a while. One of the purchasers discovered the 4 items in their due diligence. So
We had about 7 years ago, a former mayor who, there was a big empty lot where Pape Dawson is right now. And he called this special by invitation only meeting to introduce them to a developer who was going to come down and build a 4-story luxury apartment complex. They were not quite as small as these units. And he was asked, well, what about drainage? What about lighting? Oh, well, we don't know. Just pass this. And let me tell you, the consensus of everybody who was there, including Bob Jones, and he's a longtime resident of this city, and he knows real estate extraordinarily well. The great fear was that the owner would buy it and then sell it to somebody who would turn these into Section 8 pieces of property. I think that is and the council refused, the zoning refused, it didn't go anywhere, and Pape Dawson ended up building there. It seems to me that what we should do is send this back to zoning have them looking at this additional section 50-2253. I like the idea of an SUP on this thing, because it will die when the next owner buys it. All these things will allow you to do dies. And that eliminates the worry of, in my mind at least, of suddenly Castle Hills will be known as the largest Section 8 high-rise in Bexar County, because an SUP would stop that. And somebody could come in, and they could reorganize and replan, replot, and I think we would stand a substantial chance of having a very nice building there. Otherwise, I think we're leaving ourselves wide open to the next person who may want to buy it and turn it into really wretched situation.
Mr.
May
Coe.
may I speak?
Sure.
Real quick? Mr. Gregory, I actually went ahead and did quite a bit of research on the Section 8 housing and the approval to get Section 8 housing. The majority of our Section 8 housing is families. It's single moms with children. They have very specific requirements for square footage. By passing this ordinance and allowing them to have smaller units makes it highly less likely for it to ever go Section 8, because they have a heartbeat rule. For every bedroom, they can only put 2 heartbeats. So if you have a mother that has 3 children, she has to have a 2-bedroom apartment. But by allowing them to have more units and smaller units, 350 square foot units, 400 square foot units, whatever size they go to up to the 350 unit maximum, it actually decreases the chance of Section 8 moving in and taking over the building. Smaller in this case is better. And it's also better for the upcoming upwardly mobile millennials that are coming in. They don't live in their living space. They sleep there. They go to work, they're putting in their 68 hours a week, and they want to come home to a nice place to sleep. They want to go hang out at the pool. They're not looking for large spaces. So when I looked at this and I did the calculation of the square footage of the acreage that it's sitting on and lowering it from 1,500 square feet, which would only allow them to have 228 units, which makes them bigger, which in my opinion is bad because that opens it up more easily for the Section 8. When you move it to the 800 square foot per dwelling unit, you get that higher number, which also allows them to have the retail on the first floor. It adds enough above that 305 to add more units for retail in the bottom space. So just in my research, smaller is better when you're looking at low-income housing and people going in to do that. So by doing this, I almost feel like we're protecting the city in a way from having that happen.
Mr. Brennan, don't you think an SUP would protect the city above and beyond a lot of things?
It will. It gives you a lot of flexibility that you don't have otherwise. But, you know, this building has been here a long time. It's a non-conforming building at this point in time, and it can be continued as such. And I think that it's too late at this particular point in time to come up with an SUP process for this project, because they're protected by the rules that are in effect today, you know, and to try to add in an SUP requirement for this particular project now is, I think you're too late in the game to do that.
I don't think that the SUP product, the process of that gives the kind of legal peace of mind that the buyers for this property are looking for, and that's why they've come up with this. This is, from a legal standpoint, if you have a law that says one thing and your building complies with it, there's really no getting around that. The SUP process is more nebulous and there's more wiggle room in it, and I feel like by having the ordinance that backs the building, they will be able to go out and bring a better buyer to our city, which in turn is better for us as a whole.
Douglas, you know, one of the first things you said that caught my mind when we were getting ready to go into this is you said zoning took this and threw it in our laps because they didn't know what to do. Well, it sounds like to me, because the building has been in non-compliance for so many years, that whatever we decide to do, we need to get it into compliance anyway.
Can I ask a quick question? Mr. Kaufman, what does it mean? I understand that the structure is on the historic register or going to be?
Yes, sir. You know, we're trying to attract as was said, a quality developer. And, the building's built. If somebody wanted to do Section 8 housing or Section 12 or Section 20, they go do it tomorrow. They don't need to be here.
Right.
But to get the kind of person that's going to spend $20 or $30 million and make this, put it back to its glory days, you know, they operate differently. They high-risk capital. And so, I'm sorry, the question on the
Historical review, what does that mean?
One of the
register, excuse me.
Well, to be perfectly transparent, the government, there are tax credit, not housing credit, tax credit for historic renovations that may be available. And so the building was designated, and it means it's very difficult to demolish. It's going to remain. If somebody was worried, well, you're going to tear it down.
Well, I would suspect it would make it difficult for a different type of use too. You know, what the citizens are always concerned about, and I don't blame them, but I guess the question here is for Mike Brennan. Whoever we sell it to, we can't restrict what they do. I mean, whoever you sell it to. Right. So the object is to try to just get, hopefully, you all would get the best. And of course, you want the best because the people who own it want the most.
Of course.
Of course. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brennan, is it your best conclusion? I hate to circumvent the zoning commission. The second proposal of the ordinance, including section 50-225-3. This is the better than the first because it gives the city more protection.
Yeah, well, the way that is, let's see, the first sentence of 50-225-3 is crafted for the Wedgewood as it exists now. So high-rise apartments in existence prior to today shall have a minimum of 340 square feet per dwelling unit with a maximum of 305 total units. Okay, that's where it is today. That's the current situation. And then also of which no more than 84 units shall be the 340 square feet units. And then that second sentence just restates what's already in your code. So any high-rise apartments constructed after today shall have the same requirements, size requirements that the code already has.
How about the parking code, parking lot provision?
Same thing.
Number.
If you look at the parking part, the current code says 2 motor cars for each dwelling unit, but any high-rise apartment in existence prior to today can get by with 1.3 spaces for each dwelling unit. That was a number that was, I guess, negotiated, was requested by the owner, and the zoning commission agreed with that 1.3 spaces for each unit.
And currently, to meet those standards, they would have to add 70 to 80 new parking spaces. So passing it at 1.3 instead of 2, they're still going to have to add parking to what's existing now.
Because don't they have a current variance for 1.1 or something? But the goal is to clean that up so that you go to buyers with a set, not having to rely on a variance.
You have to have a minimum of 1.3.
Yeah, minimum, which would mean an increase in the current parking situation. So a betterment, once again, for the
Yes.
property and for the potential buyer.
Yes.
So,
I could correct Councilman Gregory on one little thing. I watched the zoning online all the way through, and I thought they were very diligent and very thorough, and didn't take it that they just wanted to pass it to us. I think that they did their job and that they passed it 5-zip. And, you know, they're pretty wise people. So, anyway, I just wanted to make that. Mr. Brennan, so they approved, which one of these, did this second one come up after that approval?
The first one in your book here tracks what they approved.
Right.
What they recommend. The second ordinance is a revision of that by adding back in the provisions that were removed for new apartment projects
Right.
after today.
But they weren't considering the ordinances. They were considering the concept.
That's right.
They considered the concept. So which ordinance we adopt really shouldn't have any bearing on how they feel. We are going with what they said. We're adopting the better ordinance.
Right.
There was nothing, neither one of these were in front of them.
Yeah, that's
They
right.
didn't have either ordinance to look at. So we're not really saying anything that they didn't consider. We're just not getting rid of the old stuff so that we're protected in any situation that comes up. If we have a windfall and somebody wants to build another high-rise, we're covered.
Plus, in addition, you all have the legal authority to resolve this however you deem appropriate. You can change